Yeah. All right. So tonight's subject, we've called it the kaleidoscope of product owner repertoire. So it's got inspired by the word repertoire being used in a certain context about what is it you carry in your bag and can bring to bearing on the problem you're facing, like a musician being called out to entertain, and then so what does he actually, what no cheats does he bring along that he knows he can do? And it's the same with the product owner here. What is it actually he has at his disposal? It is nowhere near going to be complete, a complete catalog of what he can do or could do. We're not going to repeat the same stuff that we do on standard product owner courses, but Tom was friendly enough to join in and come up with a couple of those slightly outlier topics that he occasionally gets into, and I'll try and do the same. So there's much more to be said, but for now, that's what it is. We're looking at this, and we all have a little something to say, and I will start it up by sort of the usual approach of checking in with those who are available now. And the first thing I would like to just talk about the word repertoire, which perhaps is a bit unusual, but according to the dictionary, it's a complete list or supply of skills, devices, or ingredients used in a particular field, occupation, or practice. That is a sufficiently wide term that we can put anything into it. If you look at it, a master chess player, he has a number of opening gambits in his repertoire that he can play. So does the product owner, hopefully. So just as a check-in, I'd invite you to think for a moment about, in your daily work, what is your prime repertoire? What things are you sort of, okay, this is what I pull out a lot of the time. Try to think about that for a moment and give us a shout and tell us what it is if you have something on mind. Just check in and reflect. We will for a moment, we'll just then try to think about, and Anja has already mentioned quite a few that fits into the product owner's repertoire. I sent in the chat a link. If you can, if you click that link, you are sent into a Google slide where you can do what we quite often have done, just post some virtual notes there of the things that you think the product owner can use in his repertoire, and fill them out on the slide there. Let's just do that for a few moments and see what happens, and if some important things come up. Building roadmaps, story mapping, ability to filter out signal from noise. Sit down with client, listen. If you want to help somebody, shut up and listen. Being the bridge. Observation, asking open questions, digging into the value. Good point. Able to identify and talk to different sides of the table. Good. Well, the good news is that quite a lot of this stuff we would definitely agree with, and it's part of what we put on the agenda for tonight. The bad news is, of course, that Okay, you already know that, so we might be boring for you, but let's hope we can give some new detail here. Encouraging the right culture and psychology, psychological safety. Great. Magic estimation, buy a feature. Good relations. Very good. We'll include this one with the PDF once we send it out. So if you think of more things, then you can always go back and write some more. But right now, we only have this hour and we want to steam on now. So here's Frank, our product owner. When we do what we do, we tend to become sort of borderline autistic and have to do it the same way. So obviously the product owner is blue in our world. That's for sure. He wears this sort of cap, and so this is Frank. He appears on a lot of our stuff. And just to list up some areas of responsibility that that we need to apply these repertoires to. So, and this is not definitely not everything you could come up with. It might even be some important things we've forgotten here, but the domain the team is working in, understanding the domain, the business, the whatever area it is we're working in, should really be sort of home turf to the product owner. Understanding the concrete objectives, like Anja said, what is it really? Have empathy with that, with the stakeholder, and get insight into their real needs, which not, by the way, are not always the spoken needs. Also on the other side, understanding the team's capabilities. Very often in a business context, of course, especially if you are in a small business, it's okay, this is the team I've got. What is it I can sell? What is it they can do? What is the battle strength of the team? What are the capabilities? At the time right now, these days here, I spent quite some time talking to Ukrainians. We've made an agreement with universities to help them out teaching. And of course, they have some very, very particular concerns about applying their teams in the right context. This is, thank God we're not in that position, all of us, but do we understand our team so we can sign up for the right jobs, or we can enter into the right projects here? Common mental model for all, that we, in order to build the right stuff, we need to roughly understand the same thing as the stakeholders. Trawling for parameters, inferring prioritization. What is it out there? Are there any risk, potential changes that we have to factor in that it might happen, etc. And then product owners' responsibility is also to be tough enough to be able to prioritize and decide, because there's likely to be conflicting areas. Yeah, so that's you now, Anne.
Yes, and I will just share my screen. So I will take over here. Can you see my screen? Okay. I think this bit that I'm going to talk about now overlaps with some of the comments that were made on the post-its. So this first point is about mediating communication between team and stakeholders. And someone wrote something about being a bridge. This is a little bit connected to that. So the product owner really should be someone who is easily accessible for stakeholders and their requests and ideas and feedback. However, they should not be the only one. It shouldn't be like a funnel where all communication goes through the PO always. That's just not advisable. Team members also need to communicate with people who might know aspects of the market that they don't see yet, and to talk directly with people as well. But the product owner has a responsibility for contributing to that these two roles understand each other as well as possible. And that's one reason why reviews reviews where if you're working with Scrum, the team is showing what they did, what they completed or were working on it during a sprint. This shouldn't just be a demo. If it's software development, for instance, it should be an opportunity for dialogue with stakeholders and to receive feedback to improve. Now, one thing you can try and work on, if you have a team and stakeholders that are connected for a while, it can be beneficial to try and sort of work on the vocabulary that is used. And tribal vocabulary might not sound like, but what is meant is sort of something that you agree on, that you understand the same with the words used. So it could be noting keywords and finding out which keywords is it important that we mean the same with when we use them, and maybe even making a list just to make sure that this isn't causing confusion, that we have different words that we're using. Everyone, and maybe especially people that are deep into details, maybe members of a development team specifically, also need to be really aware of vocabulary that you use because you have a specific vocation or have had training where this has become so normal for you that it can be hard to imagine what it was like when you didn't know those words. So sort of, I don't want to say nerd speak, but I don't know if you guys know what I mean, like sort of where you have, everyone has words that they use within their jobs. But when you need to communicate with stakeholders, it's important to be aware of what is generally understood and what is a little bit niche. And the product owner's responsibility is also to contribute to there being the psychological safety needed for people to feel like they can say, I actually don't understand. What are we talking about here? Why was it we're doing this? Or like to ask the sort of, it might feel like you're asking the dumb questions, but it's absolutely necessary that this feels like it's allowed. And perspective really does matter. And that's why it's important to work on trying to, as a product owner also, trying to facilitate a common mental model for all the various roles involved. These are pictures of a teapot, but it's from all kinds of angles, and some of them are zoomed in on details, and some of them are of the whole thing, but it also, you see different things depending on from which angle and from what level of detail. Now we are all susceptible to cognitive biases. Daniel Kahneman in his book Thinking Fast and Slow talks about that the most common cognitive bias is to think what I see is all there is. So if I'm very focused on the handle there, that might be my perspective that, well, this is what we're talking about. This is what is being developed. This is the focus, right? But someone working on another aspect of it, or who may be working from a higher level perspective on what this is once it's finished, might have a different view of it. And that's very important to be aware of.
I love you have one picture that is a completely different thing. On the
No,
top
it's
right. What
at the
is
top
that?
right.
Oh, that's
No?
the top of the pot.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you for contributing to my point, Vibeke.
Yeah, I saw
That's
a
the top.
vase.
Yes,
I
it's
saw
just
a
zoomed
vase.
in a lot, just on the lid. I think that's at least how I see it. But we sometimes talk about that when a team has reached a certain sort of level of maturity or really have worked very closely together, maybe for or probably for extended pieces of time, that they can start to develop what is called team cognition, which is sort of a term for saying that the way our cognitive how we think starts to extend, so that there are aspects of thinking that you usually see with individuals that are sort of seen in a group setting, because people know each other so well. They know each other's capabilities and limitations and ways of working and what they mean when they say something, and that's really good for a team to reach that. But the challenge is, and this is where the BO also comes in, is that to some extent that should be aimed at trying to extend that a bit to the shareholders. And of course that can't be done fully. They don't work together all the time, but things can be done to do that. That's what we mean with a common mental model as well. It can be done here. I'm just going to go through. I have like 5 and then a little Venn diagram just to show sort of the understanding overlapping. But asking clarifying questions, as mentioned, various types of tooling can help to create these models. I think Kurt is going to talk more about that as well. It might help to do some prototyping. Maybe if it's very hard for me to understand what a teapot is, it might help to see it in a cardboard first or something. I don't know, bad example, but some people are visual thinkers and need something to see first. And it can also be important to really develop some important use cases for whatever is being produced when you're working with product development. And the last point is about having shared goals, not just for the team, but involving the shareholders as well. This can be sprint goals or product goals, but something that just seems to have an effect where that ties you together, that you are completely sure what is it we're working towards just right now. What is the purpose of this? And all these little tips all rely on that it has to sort of reside on a bedrock of respect for each other's work and what these different roles are able to contribute, an awareness of that we're independent, or we're interdependent on each other. So both in shareholders and team. Yes, I think, and over to Tom. So I'm going to pass it on to you now, Tom.
I assume, you know, or Kurt can. Wait for it to come up here.
Gonna cross the dam first.
Apparently.
There's nothing there, Kurt.
He's staring it down.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
My Zoom crashed unexpectedly. It said, I'm very pleased to know that they didn't expect to crash on me, but okay. You're good to go now, Tom.
Thank you very much. Well, kind of tacking on to what Anna said about mental models and things like that, a couple of I guess, repertoire pieces that we have used in the past involve two things. One is a customer council. This, I first read about this with coming out of Marty Kagan's work at the Silicon Valley Product Group. And it's been a number of years. It probably goes back 15 years. Originally, he called it chartered or charter customer programs. We've changed the names, and I'll put the link in the chat to the Silicon Valley Product Group site in this article. You'll note the article goes back, I think, to 2007. It actually emanated out of Microsoft and their program for involving customers in the actual creation of their product. We changed the terminology deliberately because in the work that we were doing, we weren't seeing these people as charter customers. In other words, they weren't going to be first purchasers of the product, that sort of thing. But they were users that we trusted and that had significant passion for whatever product we were building. So you can see in the slide here that the purpose is to directly involve the customer or the user, depending on how you want to characterize them, directly in the product development. And the sense of this was rooted in extreme programming, where extreme programming actually demanded that you have customer representation on the team as they were building the product. And that was a key component of extreme programming. In fact, co-location of a customer representative was required in extreme programming. So we don't require that when we form customer councils, that it's fine if they do come in physically and work with us. We never discourage that, but most of the time it was a virtual association with these users or these customers. So the size of a customer council in our case was typically 6 to 10 people. The commitment from these people, usually through a document of understanding or a working agreement, was you're available to work with us, to pretty much continually check what we're building and give us immediate feedback on it. So we weren't waiting for sprint reviews to get feedback from these people. These people met with us virtually, electronically, typically during the course of development within a sprint, so that they could see what we were building, give us immediate feedback on it. They were trusted, what we call trusted users. They typically understood technology pretty well. They also had a strong sense of what they felt was needed in a product. They usually met with us at least once a week, typically on a specified day. Not everyone met with us. Some people couldn't make certain times. Some people met with us outside of scheduled time. So we would ping somebody and say, hey, we'd like you to look at this. And a couple people from the customer council would come on and we'd review what we had coded, and we'd actually show the working product to them and say, what do you think about this? What's your feedback? How intuitive is it? It's almost like empathy mapping in real time. So sometimes they would actually use the product. They'd offer comments back like, I'm not sure what to do now, or this isn't very intuitive, or we really like this, or I really like this. The thing about customer councils is they came to be stringent supporters of the product we were building. They actually advocated for the product because they were directly involved in the construction of it. They weren't building it per se, but they had a strong stake in what was being built and feedback that was provided to it. Just to clarify, they weren't doing acceptance testing, right? Not in the pure term that we think of acceptance testing. They were using the product, or they were watching the product being used, and they were offering criticisms, feedback about what they saw or what they used as they were doing it. So the the interesting thing here is you got to find people that are willing to devote the time to this. Sometimes you have to incentivize them to do it. We didn't really find that to be a problem because we weren't selling a product, so we weren't giving product away to them. But they felt a strong association or visceral stake in what was being built because it was predicated a lot on feedback that they were giving us. So that's the customer council. Maybe we go to the next slide, which is a different council. And this is the product council. So a product council differs from a customer council in that a product council exists basically to fundamentally support the product owner in their work. It depends on how the product council is structured, what the working agreement is around the product council. Some people call these product owner support groups. So it's typically comprised again of 6 to 10 people. These people often have some kind of managerial authority or executive authority. They're not there to intercede or interfere with the product owner's work. They're there basically to give feedback to the product owner, especially around conflicts or tensions, maybe trade-offs, things like that. So we typically met once a month formally as a product council, but the product owner had the ability to contact the product council as a group at any time and bounce ideas off of them or alert them to potential problems that were being surfaced. Again, they were fundamentally a support group. It's important to understand that they had, in our case, they had no authority to alter or overturn any product owner decisions. So unless there was some kind of agreement about what the boundaries around that would be with the members of the product council. Some do have additional responsibilities. Most of them attended sprint reviews in support of the product owner. They sometimes assisted the product owner in generation of new product ideas because a lot of them are familiar with the domain that the product was being built in. And once in a while, they'd have to intercede in resolving stakeholder product owner conflicts, that sort of thing. So I had a particular story, I won't go into detail, but we did have a product owner who was challenged at a sprint review about the basically the ordering of the product backlog, who wanted to insist that their items be moved up. And the product owner stood firm and said, I've talked to you about this. I'm not inclined to move your things up, but the person that made the assertion, made the challenge to the product owner, actually went to one of the product council members who was in the chain of command of the product owner and insisted that that person go to the product owner and insist that they accept their request to move the things up. And the product council person said, I can't do that. We have a working agreement. I cannot countermand or otherwise overturn any decisions that they've made. So I appreciate your concern. She's addressed it from what I hear, but I'm not interceding or interfering with her in any way. And then he said, there are other people in this room of authority that I would discourage you from going to because they're going to tell you the same thing, that they're part of this agreement that we have with the product owner, that they're not going to interfere with her authority or with her decision making. And you know, the person was a manager, not in direct line with the product owner, but was sort of incredulous about this. But that particular person, a director, stood firm and didn't agree to interfere or otherwise try to affect a change by the product owner. So once in a while we didn't have product managers at the time. Now people do have product managers. A lot of teams do have product managers in addition to product owners. So they often have separate authority from the product owners. They're often included in customer or in product councils, excuse me. And so you have to delineate what's the responsibilities and authority of a product manager versus what's going on with a product owner. And oftentimes product managers and product owners work very closely together, whereas other people on product councils often don't work that closely with product owners. And so there's a little different dynamic going on with product managers and product owners when it comes to product councils. I'll put a link. Again, Marty Kagan talks about product councils on his website. It's a bit of a dated article, and we've sort of elaborated more on it or adjusted it, but here's the link in that. And somebody asked, Anya asked whether it's like super users. I guess you could probably categorize customer council people as super users. That's a little bit of an innocuous term, but there's certainly users that are willing to commit the time and probably would be, you know, seen as potential super users of the product. At least they're going to be dynamic and persistent users of the product. Any questions about either customer council or product council? We've used them for years.
I think both are super powerful tools if you can have it. So if you manage to have users actually commit, that's great.
Yeah, that's the important part, right? Is the mutual understanding about what the commitments are from both sides.
Mm.
And
for the product council, at least from my point of view, what I don't know whether that's the same sort of, but I've always established like stakeholder groups, right? And that's maybe what you mean here. Do you? Yeah,
the stakeholder groups are separate. Product council people could be identified as stakeholders, but they're not stakeholders that are typically generally impacted by the product development directly. So you could be, you know, it's like the people that we've had on our product councils could arguably be characterized as stakeholders. There's no doubt about that. But these people are more attuned to how am I supporting and even defending the product owner in their business, you know, in what they're doing in their work. Because that we realized early on that became a huge problem for us, is that product owners felt unsupported. They felt sort of out on an island. They had things coming from them at from different directions. They couldn't really turn to anybody for support. They could turn to Scrum Masters, but we had other things going on. And we didn't often carry the authority as Scrum Masters that people on a product council would carry positionally. We didn't carry the authority. So, excuse me, when you have you know, vice presidents and directors and managers on a product council, those people tend to carry some weight behind them, and they have to be trusted that they're not going to throw their weight at the product owner to demand that they make changes. There's certainly discussions about things, don't get me wrong, but one of the very significant tenets of our agreements with product councils is you do not have the authority to come in here and tell the product owner to change anything or to do anything differently. We can certainly have product council discussions about that and about the effectiveness of what's going on. But again, you do not have any authority or right to come in and unilaterally change or demand change from the product owner.
And I think that's the key difference to a steering group, right? So in the classic organization with projects where you would have a steering group or a steering committee, they can have, as a project manager, I use them in the same way, but it's always a kind of a dance on eggshells, because you end up risking that something goes wrong and then you get it, have it coming at you. So I think
right.
that's
Steering committees in and of
right?
themselves are not particularly supportive of any particular role, right? I mean, they don't have an agreement that we are not going to interfere with this. In fact, steering committees a lot of times do interfere.
Yeah, it sounds like this is sort of formalization of the sponsorship that is needed for a product owner.
Right. We actually moved sponsorship into product councils. So we used to have, in our organization, we used to have a single person that was a sponsor. And we found out by collectively putting people into a council that strengthened that position of a sponsor. We didn't call them sponsors anymore. They were a product council member. But typically sponsors were people in our organization that product owners directly reported to. So a lot of times now that's product managers that they report to. They didn't do that in the old days when I was doing this.
Yeah.
But now a lot of times product owners report to product managers. So product managers are naturally part of the product council.
I really like the wording council, and I as I understand it, Tom, it is the authority that's the difference from all the rest we know, steering committees. So the authority lies still and stays with the product owner.
Correct.
And that's the one I'm grabbing onto. So whatever you call it, it's a support system and an improving system to support the product owner, not to change him. He keeps the authority. That's the main point for me.
That's exactly right. And we don't do anything to usurp his authority or override it or anything else, right? That's in place by agreement.
In your experience, Tom, the product council, is that a way to protect the product owner from politics and power play coming into? That happens a lot of times. You think everything is okay. You have support until someone changes his mind because it is very advantageous from a political point of view. Yeah.
Can I? I'm sorry for interrupting. It's just we have some time for questions at the end, and we have a few more repertoires to share.
Yep,
Would it be all right if we save that until the end, just to?
Of course. Sorry. Yeah.
Listen, I think I'll pass it on to Kurt, who has some. And thank you, Tom, for.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks. All right. Well, we'll see. We probably only have material left for a couple of hours yet. So, but I'll quickly jump into some just practical things. Here's a visual of some of the things that I find helpful in the product owner's repertoire. When we start working on a project, we can come from different angles and we switch back and forwards. There is no fixed linear route. This is complex, remember. So we might enter the game from different perspectives and different angles. But for example, a lot of you have seen the future backwards exercise that displays for everybody where are we, where would we like to be, and where would we absolutely hate to be. From that, you can sometimes derive some objectives that, okay, now we know what our objectives are. And you could move down to the impact map, and we'll get to an impact map in a moment, and you could be detailed and go full Monty, Tom Gilp impact estimation. Or you could move over and say, we now have a vision statement, and we develop a lean canvas, which is another way of having a mental model to focus people's little brains on. And from the lean canvas, you could go to story mapping and road mapping, as we also saw in the early comments today, and maybe a full detailed outline. And it's all part of the backlog, really. It's different incarnations, detail levels of the backlog. All of these things can be helpful. I'm sure you know a lot of them, and there are resources to find them. Otherwise, give us a holler and we'll give you some details here. Another way of saying more or less the same thing, here's our friend Frank, the product owner again. And so with a bit of so-called reverse animation, we will gradually unveil what Frank is doing. And he always focus on the why, always start with the why, the objectives, get back to those. I sat through the opening gambit of an innovation course in the University of Reutlingen and the Ukrainian universities, and And they were really hammering on how people should focus on that and make sure they really understood what is the problem or what is it we want out of this. And at the same time, who is it really we're talking about? But remember, if you remember the lean canvas, this is also, you start out in the two edges of the lean canvas. What is the real problem? And who has it? Who are we serving here? So the why and the who. And once you have a reasonable grasp on that, you can unveil more and you can do the what. And the what here is illustrated as a story map. Our favorite thing, really, the story map, a hierarchical display or version of the story map where you have large epics being decomposed into smaller epics, finally into stories that can go into sprint. But the story mapping have this very important aspect that it invokes our geographical recognition in our brain. Again, we remember much better. We remember where it is, and probably several of you have used this, but I've used it both in physical form and in our tool Agemba. And for me, this is the cornerstone of giving an overview of a larger, it's simply a larger project. It's simply another dimension added to it. So what is it we are building? And the dotted lines or dashed lines over to the objectives, well, that's, as Anja said earlier on, that's how we can map and say, well, this epic actually has a bearing on this objective, or it contributes to it. And the one that goes to the other side is this particular epic is of particular interest to so-and-so user persona. And I know Christian uses this quite a lot in trying to keep track of a wide variety of users and the system being developed. Who is it really that's interested in this kind of thing? And if we change something, who should we remember to ask? It's a different way than having the councils in a way, but it solves some of the same thing. It gives the visibility of the dependencies who are connected to this. Now, so these are the why, the who, and the what. And then there is a fourth W, the when, because it's a lot of this in the real world is connected to something in time. There are time, most of the constraints we have, or we have constraints on money and other things, but we have time constraints. We have deadlines. We have certain things that can't happen before that date, or as we've illustrated here, and the way we use it is we have the red arrow on the timeline illustrates that this is a delivery out milestone. We have to deliver something to an external party. Sometimes we actually need external parties, right? And the green arrow is when we get something back. That's a delivery in milestone. And part of the trick here is to create a timeline that is sufficiently simple that you can understand it and remember it and recognize it when you see it again, so that it will actually influence your day-to-day prioritization in the team or your sprint-to-sprint prioritization for the product owner. And finally, what we refer to as the roadmap is where you take the most important things, not everything. This is on purpose, not detailed, but those important landmarks or C marks that you need to navigate after with your teams, and you pull them out, pull them up, and make them visible on a roadmap where you can see important things. And we recommend the idea given to us by Cisco back in the day, that you start with things that relate to your market, your customer at the top. You add features and qualities that the customer care about, then you want to put in context with those things you want to have happen in the market. You have something behind the scenes and in your infrastructure, and you have some market rhythms and deadlines, and that's things that come from the outside that you can't change, and there is an exhibition there or a new law here. So that model here is actually a very handy one for the product owner to think of, saying, how do I structure my mental model so that how do I talk about things? What categories are we dealing with here? And looking at the time here, but I think I can sneak in a little commercial here for our dearly beloved tool, Agemba. And of course, we're looking in, first of all, in Agemba, we have a number of teams or circles. They are independent. Each of them are roughly like a Scrum team. If I go into the customer circle, which is out here, next to the customers, they serve the customers. Okay, in that customer circle, I have a lot of things going on. I have a roadmap, for example, here with some important milestones about a trade show. This is the topic we've highlighted here. We can actually have multiple roadmaps illustrating several things, if that makes sense to you. And you can see the connections here. There is a direct connection between this one called shipping equipment and the trade show event. Obviously, that has to happen before the trade show event. And you can move these things around here if you move them in the roadmap, and it'll adjust the dates. If you say I have to start earlier, it's longer, you can elongate it, and generally that's the roadmap. We have the story map where we here can have our objectives. If I just close this one here, you can see the 4 W's here. We have up here the objectives, and we have stakeholders over here, and I can turn on and show all the connections. And if I click this one, I can see what the objective of 5% more visitors than last year are of interest both to the CEO and the sales manager. And if I mouse over here, I can see that relation. Oh yeah, that's because the sales manager's bonus depends on this. That's why he's interested. And the booth among the top 3 most, that's actually the sales manager and the booth staff. And you can analyze dependencies, in this case here, between the why and the who, but of course there are also dependency between the what's here. If I unfold this, I can have the trade shows, and I have the full story map of the things that need to happen during this trade show. And I can also see the connections by clicking each of these. So basically, I can navigate that territory I just talked about before, use it in an online world where people are not necessarily sat in a room together. As we've moved post-corona and realize that we have to optimize our online work also with those extra difficulties. What we are trying to do here is to find ways of actually implementing something that will support people. So I want to move on a little bit. Let's see, I've got a few minutes back, and I want to now just show you a pattern that Christian and I developed for working with an epic. That is also a repertoire to have a certain way of dealing with an epic. When you get a new request, an authentic epic, you see, is it too big, too small to work with? How do we know the value? And we look at it from the Kano perspective. Is it a must-have, an exciter, or a satisfier? And we work our way through the value part. At the same time, the team is doing the effort and complexity estimation, and sometimes decomposing, estimating effort and cost of ownership, dependencies, and finally seeing if we agree on that this epic is actually ready to move forward in the process. This was a large system development, and they needed to have a process in place. Now, a lot of you might say, well, wasn't Scrum supposed to be free form and everybody self-organizes? Correct, but there's a balance between form and freedom, and sometimes an organization needs a bit more form, and here's a proposal for a certain thing you could have in your repertoire. I would like to just skip to one here about impact estimation. Our dear friend Tom Gill promotes that. And so what is that really? This looks awfully complicated, but his fundamental idea is you identify the up to 10 most important values or objectives. And I guess it's about the same thing that Anja said earlier on. And the 10 most obvious strategies that you have that can affect these values, that will contribute. And so on each of these, with the dotted lines, you have a 50% and a 90% estimate. So you estimate an interval. You start up here by estimating what is the value, the business value really, if that objective is fulfilled. What is it? What do I believe it is? And what would it be worst case? And then you do the same with the implementation and estimate the cost and the uncertainties on the cost as well. Now, once you have that, you move into the middle of the diagram and you fill out the relevant squares or intersections with how much does this implementation contribute to this value, this objective. And you go across, some of them don't contribute to this one, but they do contribute to that, and they actually contribute negatively to the other one, and you list them up and you get a whole swag of these. But in the end, with a fairly simple spreadsheet, you can get the value and the return on investment for each implementation with uncertainties, and you can get it in the columns as well. And there you can get a better background for prioritizing what is it I'm going after as a product owner. This is what Tom Gill basically been hammering on and thundering about since the 80s. And I guess the only reason that we don't do it is that it's too damn hard. It's like this movie, The Scent of a Woman, where Al Pacino, he says at the end, he says, at every crossroad I came to in my life, I knew what was the right path, and I didn't take it. You know why? It was too damn hard. And this is also quite hard. And but I cannot stress enough how important it is to think about it in larger projects and to make sure you spend your money right. If you want to know more about it, we've actually done a specific training course on it. There are things to be known here. In the end, you can end up with a proposal where you could say, this proposal, there is a certain cost, there's a worst case cost, there's a certain expected value out of this that we have estimated as good as we can, and there's a certain worst case value that we think this will result in. That gives us a return on investment on 153%, worst case 111. And so you take that to your board and say, this is my proposal. As some of you know, we did that in Norway with Riks TV. It was part of a project where they did this, and the CEO actually went to the board with such a proposal with a relatively large uncertainty, and they fell off their chairs and said, no, we want a fixed number. And he was bold enough to say, no, you can't have it. Sorry, if you can't stomach this, we have to find another project. So with this, time is up, and we still had a few more things to go with, but you will have to read those in in the PDF that you get afterwards. So sorry about rushing it, but let's see if there are some questions before Anne gets to say her last commercial here. Any questions or comments? I was, what happened here?
And stole the screen.
Okay. Good for Anna.
Sorry. Yes. No, you can still have time for questions if anyone has a hand up.
You go ahead, Anna.
Okay. Okay, I'll do 2 minutes. So we're all connected to Agile House. We do education, assistance, and tools. We work with Scrum and our scaling framework, Agile Leadership. We do training, as has already been mentioned, and Scrum. And we have various tools, and you already saw a little bit of Agemba, and I just wanted to say you'll get this link as well. I'll put it in the chat also, if anyone wants to try it out for themselves. And this is just a little slide about our network, and you're very welcome to contact us if you are interested in. We have both for educators and trainers and for organizations a network. And this is the slide for questions. Back to that. And I will stop recording if I can figure it out. And but this is the official end.